feedback when I came last year and spoke at integration of AI and GRC. We're taking a little bit more specific this year. A little bit about myself. So Gunter, I'm one of 3 partners at Cential, have been in the risk management compliance space for 10 plus years. I'm an attorney by trade, so when it comes to beyond accounting, I'm really focused on the beyond part. My other business partner couldn't make it here today, Yanni, who you can see his name up. He is our accountant at the firm. I'm the attorney. But luckily we have David Ponder with us, who is one of our brilliant partners who really focuses a lot of his time around AI, audit, IT, GRC, really kind of a gamut of pieces. I come from a target corporation, PwC, and ultimately Cential background, where I focus my practice around helping organizations build out risk management, compliance management practices, and integrating technology to support it, like GRC technologies and AI. David, I'll let you introduce yourself in Cential.
Yeah, my name is David Ponder. I am not going to be one, so sorry for the disappointment. Anyone who was here last year at the CEOing president with Andrew here. But hopefully I'll stand in and fill some large shoes. At Cential, we do a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. So a tough act to follow with Liam and Shalene and Simone. Excellent presentation. They were all talking about the people side of things and leadership. And we're going to talk more about the process and technology side of things. So think about the golden triangle. We'll take those other 2 legs after that excellent presentation. A little bit about myself. I started out my career, if you had told me that I'd be presenting in front of you all, I would have how's that gonna work? I started out in MIS and got my first position out of college was with Bearing Point, formerly KPMG Consulting, but it was at the Defense Information Systems Agency, and I was doing coding of financial applications. So found my way through Ernst & Young, right, and started to get a little bit more into this world. Did a lot of SOX support, IT audit work. I was in their IT risk and assurance group. There were some plugs for assurance in that first group. And then made my way to found Cential in 2015. So we've been around going on 10 years doing all of this, and this is about what we do. And I'm going to start off by talking about, I'm going to introduce this topic of third-party risk management by talking about something that should be familiar to most of us. I'm talking about my morning coffee. So there's a place in town that I like to go for my morning coffee. It's called the Webster Groves Coffee Garden. And I'm from St. Louis, and Webster Groves is a suburb neighborhood in St. Louis. And this place to me gives me an experience with my coffee, right? I can envision what it's going to be like when I go get a coffee in the morning. I'm thinking that I may have just finished a bike ride with my kids and they're getting hot chocolate with me. I'm ordering a latte or something like that and sitting at a picnic table. Oftentimes they have live music. I'm there for the experience, I'm there for the coffee. I know that they have high quality coffee. I know it's consistent, I've been there many times. And it serves as a ritual to me and has become my go-to, right? Like during the week, I might pick something else just out of convenience or because I'm in a rush. But if I get the choice, this is the way that I want to experience.
And this is very different than my coffee experience. My mother-in-law moved in with me in the last year, and she insisted we get rid of the coffee pot and replace it with Keurig. So my coffee experience compared to David's, where it's very fine, this nice coffee shop, is we put it in the pot, we push it down, and I get my coffee a minute later, one pod at a time. Very, very wasteful, but it works for me. But David, as you're going through those coffee decisions, talk to us a little bit about how you came to be this. Now, if Yanni was here, Yanni's the snob. He's the coffee snob around it, where he will care about the specific bean, where it came from. He'll give you the full lectures, but instead you're going to get David's experience, which is
mine basically is it not Folgers or Maxwell House? Then I'm good. But no, seriously, there are many things that go into making a good coffee, and I'm aware of those things. Maybe not to the level that Yanni is, but let's pretend. Huh? So roast, right? The roast affects the entire flavor profile. Something that has been roasted less is going to allow the acidity and the flavor to come out of the beans, or something that's roasted a little bit more, you're going to be tasting the roast. You're going to be tasting a lot of the toastiness of it. The taste and the flavor, that has to do with where the beans are sourced, the region that they come from, etc. Consistency, right? You're going to look for consistency in your product. If I purchase a certain brand and bean of coffee, I would like it to taste, as close to possible across time. I'd like to have that same experience that I had, that I came to love. And then there's things that you do too, right? You put in milk, it could be whole milk for creaminess, or some sort of a nutty milk for nuttiness and flavor, and so on and so forth. And each one of these things are a decision that you make about what seems to be a simple choice, a cup of coffee.
And what I didn't hear in that list was anything that was really related to third party yet, but let me throw a scenario out at you. You find out that your favorite roaster, the beans are sourcing from used child labor. Do you still go with that coffee shop?
Absolutely not.
Yes, absolutely.
No, unless this is my house. Yeah. We're child labor in my house.
Your children.
So,
choice between Folgers and the child labor beans at the roasted coffee.
Yeah, I'm reluctantly choosing Folgers there.
Now, and that lines up is that, did you ever ask the question ahead of time going to this coffee shop about child labor?
Yeah, didn't cross my mind.
No, most people don't. You assume that they're meeting all those standards. And there was research done by the Journal of Economics Philosophy. They put out a paper that is called The Bad News Impact on Consumers' Decision Making. They don't always care about the good news or all the work that you've done to prevent something to happen. But the moment something bad does happen, child labor comes out. You didn't find out one of your roasters or one of your farmers was using it. That's when it has a negative impact on your organization. And so you take that into consideration here is that David never once asked the question, where are you sourcing those beans? Do they use child labor? Maybe he cared about a little about fair trade, organic, but most of the time when the bad news comes out, that's when you really feel an impact. And right now we're just talking about coffee and small organizations, but if you were to grow this out into significantly larger ones like Starbucks, now they're using thousands of farmers, thousands of third parties to go to help source beans and bring them into their facilities or into their stores. And so this really comes down to third-party decisions. Who are you selecting your organization's third parties? And what is a third party is probably the more important question here. So when we say third party from an organization perspective, really what we're talking about is any entity that your organization works with, whether it's another business, a partner, a consultant, as well as their third parties. So you may be contracting with one organization that's sourcing those beans are sourcing it from another individual that's farming it, and the list goes on from there. All those spots become potential third parties as well as potential risks in your overall supply chain.
Now, if you think about it, there's two things to think about. I'd like to bring up about that. So now you've got your third party, fourth parties, and fifth parties and things. And this becomes a tough challenge if you are trying to assess multiple entities. This is a challenge that has been tried to be addressed over and over again. We're all familiar with what has become SSAE, formerly, it was SAS 70, now it's SOC reports, right? It was SSAE 16, now it's SSAE 20. That's one way that it's tried to be addressed. Other ways that it's tried to be addressed have been through private organizations like shared assessments, coming up with standardized questionnaires that can be sent out to everyone. And if you think about the demand that this places across the industry, right? Thinking about third-party risk and ways to lower your risk and to be compliant, there are regulations that have come out that have really highlighted this challenge. The ESG, the proposed ESG that just came out, it was proposed by the SEC. It was the most commented rule in its comment phase ever. I think there were more than 14,000 comments, public comments that were made on the rule. And I believe it's still in draft format, probably because of that. And one of the biggest and most contentious areas of it was around the scoping, right? So there was scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And on scope 3 emissions, you were responsible for your not just your third parties, but also knowing about your fourth parties, your fifth parties, all down the chain, right? And people raise their hand and say, wait a minute, this is really tough to deal with. We don't know how we're gonna get our arms around this. And I think it's something that they're still struggling with trying to understand. You don't think about that when you make your initial decision for purchase, right? We're talking about a coffee thing here. But it is important enough that it will impact the business and potentially the entire industry if you think about the risk that is involved.
And what David's really describing here is just the overall third-party risk management. And most of the time when we talk third-party risk management, organizations think of, all right, I'm identifying my vendors, I'm performing some sort of risk assessment. Usually it starts out just in the cybersecurity space. And that's where a lot of them end. But it goes significantly further than that to really do this correctly, because what you haven't heard us talk about once yet today is cybersecurity concerns, except for the fact that it's on the screen right now. All the risks we've talked about were non-cybersecurity. They're risk-based, event-based, financial, compliance, operational, all those type of concerns. And this is pretty normal for most organizations that we see. They always start with cybersecurity. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I'm ex-Target. In 2013, we experienced a major data breach. At that time, there was a huge concern and a lot of money put into cybersecurity as the number one risk when it came to third parties. So what did most organizations do? They invested in cybersecurity, third-party risk management, and ignored a lot of these other areas.
There's some other reasons why cybersecurity is typically the area where third-party risk management starts. If you think about it just from a coffee example, when you go purchasing coffee, sitting between you and the barista is probably a point of sale system, right? A piece of technology. And around that point of sale system, you're going to be transmitting financial data, customer information, potentially PII. And all of a sudden, you start to think of things as we do, right? Especially as my history with PCI compliance, IT audit comes into play when you're talking about taking payment cards. There's a regulatory aspect now that comes into play. There is a compliance aspect that comes into play with a piece of technology. So small and medium-sized organizations, they don't typically start the process of third-party risk management out of a desire we really want to start a third-party risk management program. No, it's usually because they are required to by some sort of a regulation or law in the beginning, and that sets the seed for them to say, okay, this is something that we have to do, and that starts the part where then they realize it, they address that piece of it, often starts in cybersecurity, and then it grows from there.
And where usually it grows from, it starts again about just by initially identifying those vendors, assessing those vendors, and then it's the spot. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Yep. This jump right here is where we see most organizations fall down, because they run out of time, they run out of resources to take beyond just that initial assessment into ongoing monitoring. If you assess your vendor once, that vendor's probably not going to be the same in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, nor is it probably our interaction with them is going to be the same, because our business relationship evolves over time. And from there is, what if we actually identified issues? I can't tell you the number of times I've gone to an organization and they say, yes, we have a third-party risk assessment. We documented they had some issues, but the business moved forward from anyway. Good enough, we're done. What about all those issues? How are we actually remediating those? And finally, how are we reporting and continuously improving upon that program? And what this cycle shows and what we see is that it's a huge manual lift to get to this spot. And I think that's kind of the message around this is when it comes to people, process, technology, the process is there, or could be there, but it's the people and the will and the manpower or the people power to really get this to do this right. And that's where AI begins to step in and make a difference here.
Yeah, we end up seeing organizations that are struggling with the burden of handling this entire process because of resource constraints. Small and medium-sized organizations, don't have the resources to dedicate to a full, well-developed, mature third-party risk management process a lot of times. And especially if it's compliance-driven, they're looking at it as a check-the-box activity, trying to make sure that they are compliant, and they look at it almost like a point-in-time thing. Okay, we passed that assessment, we got the certification, we got clearance with the regulatory body. Now let's get back to business. And that's not, obviously, we all know that's not the right way to look at things. There's a monitoring component and an ongoing continuous sustainability component to any good third-party risk management program. And I think that's where there's really an opportunity here when we talk about AI.
So we started going down this process of determining how the AI can be leveraged here. We have one demo, we're working on multiple other ones. We'll talk through what that could look like and how that can be integrated. Oh, I jumped over this slide. Anything else you want to add on integrated risk management here today?
Well, yeah, I mean, to revisit the concept of what starts third-party risk management and what matures third-party risk management, I just think it's important to hit on the fact that you can see here, this is the integrated risk management wheel, so to speak. It calls out a bunch of major process areas that happen across the second and third lines of defense. These should all look familiar to you. And there tends to be this chicken or egg scenario with third-party risk management, which is third-party risk management driving the maturity of the broader integrated risk management program, or is it the other way around? And if you think about why that's the case, why that chicken or egg scenario exists, is because they share parts of this process. And I think this is, kind of a hook to say, look, if you can use a technology like AI to help automate any piece of this, you're going to get benefit across other major process areas potentially as well. And with third-party risk management, think of the things that Andrew just talked about. He talked about issues management. That's going to be a process that's shared amongst these. You can think about the foundational aspects of the things that go into third-party risk management, knowing who your vendors are, knowing your products and services, inventorying them. All these things serve as a base foundation for risk data across these other major process areas. And if you can gain efficiency and share that efficiency among them, it's a multiplier effect.
This reminds me of one of our clients we work with is in the tire industry. And during the enterprise risk assessment process, what we identified was they had an issue where 90% of their tires were being produced in China. And the US-Chinese relationship is sometimes a little rocky, let's just put it that way. But it's unlikely, but what happens if the US put major sanctions on China for any number of activities? What would that do to their business? Now, there's a third-party risk element in here regarding who are they sourcing their tires from a manufacturer's perspective, that when they're getting shipped over. There is a business continuity perspective of if the Chinese exports were shut down, they were no longer able to receive those tires, what would happen? And then an overall operations perspective of how do we continue operations? Now, what they've started doing is they begin to move some of the production out of China and pushing it to India to try to diversify their risk. So that's one way it starts to get into third-party risk management around where are manufacturers located, how are we working with them, and do we need to diversify a little bit? We're beginning to integrate multiple elements here of third-party risk management, enterprise risk management, some incident management or business continuity, all that come together to help better manage risk and better operate your business.
And I think it's worth mentioning that's one of the goals, especially of small and medium-sized organizations that don't have a lot of resources. They still want to mature their program and get past looking at this is just a compliance exercise. They would like to get to the point where they are using their risk data to protect their business objectives, that true risk management decision making, and again, efficiency can drive that.
So, as I alluded to just a few minutes ago, we do have this first example or the example here. What we've done is we've integrated a AI directly into one of the GRC platforms. This one is Archer, but it could really be any platform. In this case, all we're doing is just trying to fill out the initial profile of the vendor. So this is like step one when it comes to the third-party risk management process. What was done was we put in the name of IBM. We can put some additional details if we want, click save, and that's actually queuing up the AI to begin to perform the work. So in a second, what you're going to see is it's going to populate information about the vendor. A description around it, their a number of employees, the DUNS number, I think the ticker symbol's on there, and here it comes, recalculate. Boom. Relationship overview, some general risk considerations. As it continues to go down, it will continue to add pieces to it. This type of work can take anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple hours for any individual to do. AI was able to do that in about a minute and a half. Now, this still requires human intervention. Humans should still go and look at this to review that it's accurate. But this type of capability just wasn't even available about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago. Last year when we gave this presentation, I think we talked about AI is only good up to about 2022. Now it has full access to the internet and the data can be live and we can start pulling that information in. So the capability around what we can do is continuing to exponentially grow from month over month where we were.
A little bit more context about this. We have the ability to give the AI contextual data about who we are as an organization and about what questions we are asking it for. And we're doing that on a field-by-field basis here and at the instance level so that the AI knows what entity they're working with. We can tell it what about our entity, how many employees we have, what locales we operate in, therefore what regulatory requirements we might have, and try to really tailor the response that we're getting back from the AI to fit and really give us a solid foundation of risk data. Now, this is just the vendor profile entry, right? And so obviously we talked about all the benefits of gaining efficiency. I think we all understand that. And this is the first piece. But with some advancements in AI that have happened recently, it's really unlocked use cases that apply to the entire process.
So when we look at this overall process, what we're going to talk about now is taking it from the third party all the way around the wheel to the final report. Now we won't go deep into each one of these today, but what you're going to see is that every step of the process, there's spots where AI can be utilized today, as well as you begin to imagine where this is going. The longer time frame that we have here and the further AI is developed, the deeper we can go with each one. So we've already demoed this initial one of just entering the name and third-party description. That's actually probably the easiest one of the bunch to do, so that's why we started there. I'd say we're at our beta version right now. But where we're heading is the ability to start populating information around individual engagement. So if you're working with IBM, you probably have multiple different ways that you work with IBM. Different products, different services, whatever it might be, and each one will require their own review. As well as from there being able to tier those individual vendors regarding how important they are compared to your broader data set. You have thousands of vendors. Who are your most important ones? That's currently all done manually. But the big one that we're working on right now sits right here underneath assessment. And I think this is where we're going to see the most power coming forward. And what we're focused on is this idea around the SOC 2 and policies. What we're able to do now is take a SOC 2, drop it into the system, and automatically have the AI do the full review of the SOC 2 for us, pull out key controls, pull out bindings, populate that information for us. That's hours and hours and hours of work when you start considering the thousands of vendors that needs to go into it, that we can automate that entire process with it.
Yeah, to get a little bit deeper into the process that needs to happen for this to occur, think about the way that a SOC report is reviewed, right? The steps that you perform when you're reviewing a SOC report include things like looking at the period of coverage, looking at the scope and the system description to make sure that it covers the products and services that you care about, that you ask for the SOC to report on. When you create those engagements at that step back there, you're typically creating an engagement, right? We started with IBM, the vendor, and then underneath that, you're going to interact with IBM in many different ways. They offer many different products and services, and so you're probably going to create an engagement that's specific to a product or service for that scoping. Because then when you go down the line and you're doing your assessment, your risk assessment, it's going to be focused on those areas, those products and services that IBM provides. It's not coincidental that that's the way SOC reports, SOC 2 reports especially, are written, right? They focus on a service and then they decide what trust services criteria apply to that product or service. And when you're reviewing your SOC report, one of the steps is making sure, all right, does the scoping of this match? And does the period of attestation match what I'm looking for? Is it a qualified report? Like what is the attestation conclusion from the third party attestation entity? Are there any sub-service organizations? Do I have to care about CSOCs, right? Sub-service organization controls. What about the controls that we should be performing internally to support this SOC report, right? The CUECs. All these pieces are part of a proper SOC report review process. It's complicated for a human to do. It's also also a little complicated for an AI to do it, but with the power of GRC platforms, and they've always meant to gather risk data, hold risk data, and automate workflow. You can take existing risk data that you have on all of those areas. So you know who your vendor is. We just showed you how that happened, right? You know what the engagement is because you enter it in on the product or service that you're looking for. So by the time you get down to the assessment piece and you're getting ready to review the SOC report, you can provide the SOC report. It can be sent to the AI, and they have these things called private assistants, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then it can compare that to the known data about what vendor are we assessing this SOC report for, what is the engagement, so what are we looking for as far as what it should be covering, et cetera, et cetera.
I think a key thing we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, but is we're not just using ChatGPT or just like plugging information into there. These are models that are powered by OpenAI, but are private to that organization that allows us to give it more information and even train it on our information and provide our details to it. So this is no longer just a public model where we can say, write me a fancy email and it gives me back an email. These are specifically trained models to execute specific tasks inside third-party risk management to automate this process. Now, this can go beyond third-party risk management, obviously, begin to think about all the different applications where it can take you, but today we're focusing on probably the 30-some use cases just in third-party risk management alone to begin to automate some of these processes.
Yeah, and every time we demo this to a new organization, you can see light bulbs going off in folks' head. They're, oh, you could use it to do this. This process would really, really be helpful. And we said, yep, yes, we can. We're putting it on the line, on the list. But there are other areas, so we've gone in depth talking about how it can review a SOC report. Other really important use cases that fall in line on this one fall under the issue and remediation piece, which we can talk about. They fall under the assessment piece, the questionnaire.
So we'll stop here on issues of remediation. One thing we've done is like as you're evaluating a SOC 2 or you're doing any of the other review assessments, you may have those issues of remediation that we talked about. Another spot where it takes a lot of time to execute. When we combine AI with these workflow tools, the GRC tools, we're able to automate the creation of some findings and even automate the recommendation of here's how we recommend you remediate those findings and then send that off to the vendor.
Yeah. Here are the risks in your risk register that this finding relates to.
We technically, probably in the next year to do this without any human intervention, but that would carry significant risk as well. And I wouldn't encourage any organization to do that because you still want that human touch to review that, to making sure that we're covering the hallucinations, we're covering the biases, we're making sure that everything's accurate. But that capability just continues to grow regarding how much we can do with AI to automate this process, which is usually a big gap for most organizations being able to cover this full circle.
Yeah, I'll touch on one more use case because
Go for it.
Cool one, and it'll probably be the one that we work on after the SOC 2, and that is automated questionnaire completion. So organizations get fatigued because they're getting asked questions over and over again, right? Like this is the thing that SOC 2s were invented to try to prevent, is getting audited over and over again by different entities. But organizations still, they have their special sauce when it comes to their third-party risk assessment process, and they have to ask the questions that they want to ask. Of course, they'll probably take the SIG as a foundation of the cloud.
Some of these are like 500 questions long.
Yeah.
And I mean, customized for that organization what they want to ask, but typically they all consist of a lot of the same information.
And think about being an analyst who answers these questionnaires over and over again. I've had the pleasure of doing a few of them, and if I could help automate that, I definitely would take advantage of that. But so yeah, with AI, you can complete a SIG questionnaire, take your 3, most important clients questionnaires that you got from them last year, complete those, train your private model on the answers to those questions, and then inevitably when they send you the questionnaire next year, you've at least got the automated responses to go, and maybe there's a handful of new ones that they decided to throw in you that you have to put somebody to answer.
The AI will take a stab at it, but you should probably, again, always review everything that comes out of it. And then the final piece that we're working on too is just the overall final report. Bring it all together into a single report. A really strong thing for an AI to take that first draft at. We always call it the blank page challenge. One thing that AI is really good at is filling in the blank page. And then from there, you can take it a step further to begin to review, update, and modify those. That's kind of that full life cycle from start to finish. Now, we've alluded to some of these considerations that AI is not without its challenges, without its concerns, and typically these are the four main objections we hear whenever it comes to actual utilization of AI in an organization. The first one is around AI hallucination. I think most people know this term now. It's still one of my favorites. This is really that the AI, if you ask it a question, it will give you an answer. Whether that answer is right or wrong, may or may not, it can really range. And whenever it gives you a wrong answer, really they're calling it hallucination. It will make stuff up. It will make up organizations, it'll make up law firms, it'll make up cases that don't exist. There's been multiple examples of that. Hallucinations have been decreasing with newer and newer models that have been released. I've seen less of this, and now that there's starting to kind of root it out. But whenever we're putting one of these in place, we set targets around what's acceptable from a hallucination and accuracy perspective. We want it to be at least 90% at minimum from an accuracy rating. Otherwise, that use case shouldn't actually go into effect.
And I'll plug the big companies on this one, right? Like when we first started running these, we would see hallucination pop up time to time. Less and less we're seeing them. And I'd like to take credit for it, but really it's not by any of our work. It's because they're really getting better at dialing these things in. We've also noticed them saying more and more, if they don't have access to the information, they'll say, I don't know. I'm unable to help you with this. Why don't you look at that X, Y, and Z? The other thing that we've done to try to lower hallucination, and this, if I do plug anything that we've done, this would be it, is trying to expand the contextual prompting that we give when we send over a question. That helps dial it in, helps give it a little bit of an understanding about where we're coming from, and usually helps avoid hallucination responses.
And in bias, I think everyone's pretty familiar with the bias one. We oftentimes hear this coming out of HR, but there is an impact here in third-party risk. If you're using a solution to evaluate your third parties, if it's looking at your past vendors that you've selected, there may be a bias towards specific vendors, specific vendor locations, or even makeup of the owners from ethnicity, economics, countries that they're coming from. So you do need to be aware that bias can creep into it, even if it's unintended, and it can show its face in different ways. The final one here, we've talked a little bit of accuracy and reliability, is data privacy and security. This is kind of that big one that everyone's always concerned about. It's our data. We can't give it to another organization, and we can't have people putting it into ChatGPT because then it's gone, which is true. Don't take your organization's data, drop it into a public-facing ChatGPT. It's now ChatGPT's pretty much property to do and train their model on. But what ChatGPT has done, and OpenAI to be exact, these other ones, is that they're enabling organizations to have their own private models. So it's almost like a cloud-based. If you're going to use AWS, you don't own those servers, but you're putting your data out there. It's the same thing with OpenAI. If you're going to have your own organization's private model, you'd be paying for that. You now have your own model that you can train with your data. So you're much more expert in this space because you probably spend 20% of your time talking about this one.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of SOC reports, OpenAI in particular, Google, they make SOC reports available for review in these areas. So in the same way that you would put an application server out onto AWS for hosting, right? And then Amazon becomes your subservice organization. It's the same sort of situation, right? You're having a private hosted model, so to speak, instead of a private hosted server.
And the last piece is what we talked about is always accuracy and reliability. Every answer should be reviewed. AI can do things a lot faster, but it may not always do it more accurately. So whenever those responses come out, always have that human interaction around it, making sure you review and touch everything, which we've said multiple times. So
Yeah. A couple more things on the data privacy and security. The second one, we did this presetation at a SOC. Man, we got peppered on that one.
It's full of IT auditors for those not familiar with SOC. So they really leaned in hard.
So in our software, in our AI hub, we actually have built in, and this was prior to the advent of us being able to use these private hosted models, we built in a couple data security and privacy controls. Number one being a pattern matching recognition scrubber. So you could say, look, if anything comes through and it looks like it's a social security number, it looks like it's a credit card number, it looks like it's this type of account number, don't send it to the LLMs, right? So that's still in place. And the other one is just whitelisting and blacklisting, right? So this is our company name, never send it. These are our client names, never send these. So we still have those and we have that ability. It's just become, a lot safer since we're able to have these private hosted models that don't train other models, that are your data.
So I think where we're at in the AI journey now is we've gotten over probably the initial hype. That was 2022, 2023. We're now entering the phase of application. And we're still probably very, very early on in how this is going to be applied. We keep exploring new ways of where we can utilize it, how it can be leveraged. We talked about a handful today, but I think what we're going to see is that we're still a long ways away from ever getting to perfection, but progression on this is significant, and it's changing how organizations work, how third-party risk management works, how the general risk compliance function will be working in the future. I think globally this will have impacts that we don't really fully understand yet.
Broadly, the way that I try to think about this, and an analogy that I use, is that when the iPhone came out in 2007, I don't think people realized how often and how integral smartphones would be in our daily lives, right? I remember my first reaction to it was, cool, I now have a phone and my iPod in one. Oh, and it's got a calculator. Awesome. I didn't realize that I would be doing my banking basically all every day on it. It would be telling me where I go, whether I'm walking or in a car. That I would be chatting with my children through video, like I did this morning through it, and how just about every part of our life is now integrated into it. I don't think we really understood it. It was like, oh, cool, touch screen and these functions, great. And I kind of think that's where we're at with this, right? There are many, many organizations working like we are to integrate this functionality, to integrate the power of AI into many different processes, many different products. And I think you're going to see those over the next course of the decade, of this decade and decades to follow. And we are now, taking it and saying, how can we make our work lives easier when we're working in our risk management tools? And I think hopefully you guys enjoyed the very first demo of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, David Martin, this is the second part of the presentation coming up with Cential. So thank you, Andrew and David. Do you need this?
Yes.